Here.
Here.
Alderman Novak.
Here.
Alderman Glidden.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Here.
Alderman Moore.
Moore or Morsh? Morsh is here. Here.
Alderman Schoenhyder.
Here.
Alderman Luby.
Here.
Alderman Palmer. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is consideration of the minutes from the Finance Committee meeting held on September 20th. Any questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is consideration of the fiscal year 2010 treasurer's report. Kathy, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to Illinois State statute, a treasurer's report must be filed with the city clerk and the county clerk and published within a Lake Forest newspaper within 6 months after the end of our fiscal year. This report will be published in the October 28th edition of the Lake Forester, and we are asking you to acknowledge its receipt.
Can I get a motion acknowledging the receipt?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're going to switch the order on the agenda for the next item, and we are first going to talk about the water system, the supplied versus billed water report, and I will turn it over to Michael Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Mayor, members of the Finance Committee. This evening, we are going to give you a very brief presentation of what we refer to as simply a water audit. As you know, over the past 2 years, we've been studying our water loss, looking at different possibilities of the discrepancy between what we have pumped and what we have metered. Simpson, M.E. Simpson, we hired on to do a study to basically look at everything that we have analyzed over these past 24 months, and this evening they have their final report for you. So I'd like to introduce John Van Arsdale, the Vice President of Simpson Co., and Tom Jakubowski, President of Water Accountability. The two, this is what they do every day, much more so than myself and people in our department, and finance department. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and he'll take you through a quick PowerPoint for the report.
Good evening. As stated, my name is John Van Arsdale. I'm a Vice President with M.E. Simpson Company. A little brief history. I am current chair of the National Water Loss Committee for the American Water Works Association. We are involved in this type of work. Tom Jakubowski is the former chair of the Water Loss Committee. We have a good deal of rich history behind us on how to do water audits. I will not use this. Okay. Pardon? Okay. Brief overview. We're going to talk about water loss control, the data that was given to us. We're going to briefly introduce you to the water audit spreadsheet from the American Water Works Association that we use to analyze your system and come up with the conclusions that we derive from the spreadsheet. At this time, I'm going to turn the floor over to Tom Jakubowski.
Good evening. As John did the intros, we appreciate your time here. We'll try to go through this relatively quickly. Hopefully you've seen the report and what we put together. And this just basically summarizes the results of the report. Really, water loss has been around for a long time, so you guys aren't the first ones that have confronted this issue. As you see in 3000 BC, they were fighting this. The Roman Empire commissioner looking at the importance of equitable water distribution. So this is a key issue, especially when water now is becoming more and more scarce. It's really a major issue in the southern states and in California out west. We're pretty happy that we have the Great Lakes here and at least have the source available for your water use. It is all now metered and audited. That's what we do for a living. We account for all the water that's lost in your water system. It's pretty simple. It's really the water that's been pumped in and the water sold. That difference is really non-revenue water, so it's a pretty easy concept. Water loss, when you look at it, it's basically, we've gone through a lot of effort in regard to doing the best management practices as a national committee and issuing this as really the M36 manual on water loss control and software that we developed recently. And with the help of the committee and myself, we put a lot of this stuff out just recently, and the state regulators have accepted this. Many states have gone in this direction. It's really a combination of International Water Association with the American Water Works Association to develop this. We try to throw out the word unaccounted for water. You guys probably see that in your Lake Michigan reports. There is no such thing as unaccounted for water, so we really look at it as non-revenue water as the issue. And there's always acceptable losses in a system. You're never gonna get a perfect system. The age of your infrastructure out there, you're gonna have losses. There's gonna be weeps and seeps through that piping network, and a lot of that is unavoidable leakage out there, so you're never gonna get a perfect system. What we did is went through quite a bit of data review. We asked for a data request, went through 17, 18 months of data on a monthly basis with your departments, and kind of categorized where all the water was being used, and really put it to graphical interpretation. What you see here, and if the pointer works, no, that's not it. Is it the top one? There we go. The pointer works here. What we did is looked at your pumped water in the square and the triangular meter water, and that difference over a monthly period. And you can see your usage in the summertime quadruples. So let's say, for example, if I use 50 gallons of water in my household, and 10 of those gallons were being lost a month, that would be 20% of the water being lost in my system. Well, if I use 200, if there's 200 gallons coming in, 10% or 10 gallons was being lost, then that would mean 20%. So the percentages can fool you, and that's where you're getting your jumpy percentages there in regard to loss. You're getting real high percentages on your winter months, and due to the seasonal fluctuation in use, those percentages would drop quite a bit to a livable amount of below 10%. So if you're doing this and tracking this on a monthly basis, it makes it difficult to see those percentages, the right percentages. You should do it on an annual basis and get an average of percentages. Here's a graphical interpretation. So if you look at this, the average gallons per day per minute pumped in your system over those months jumps seasonally. But the losses, the average gallons per day of minute losses, is pretty flat across the board. You're going to have some seasonal leaks in the middle of winter. You're going to blow some pipes due to the weather, but it's pretty flat throughout. Here's another interpretation of the water loss in your system. If you see here again, this is really flat in regard to the losses in your system based on the pumpage. So this might be a little bit difficult to see, but the percents really that you were tracking on a monthly basis were fluctuating so much when there was really because of the pumpage in the system, it fluctuated so much that the percentages of the real losses out there were pretty flat throughout the year. Here's another graphical interpretation. You're looking at the real losses in your system minus any unavoidable losses. I talked a little, your infrastructure's older. You're looking at about 2,000 to 3,000 gallons per day per mile of main out there that you can't really go after because those are losses that are out there. They're not economic to go after because, you know, the cost for you to go out there and dig the leak, find the leak, patch the leak for a small amount of loss, it doesn't pay. So those are unavoidable losses that are consistent with systems your age out into the system, and they'll be very, very difficult to reduce. But the real losses are the ones you want to chase down. Here's another graphical interpretation of that. Your unavoidable losses are pretty flat. These are your real losses as they bump up. Probably in the month of January, you probably had a main break, you fix the main break, it flattens out a little bit, you have some other trouble month to month, and that's really tracking your real losses. Really, if you look at the water losses in your system, we go through an audit process with all the data requests and the data information and walk through a very methodical auditing process. And it is basically a water balance. It comes from your source or water imported, and basically you walk through from left to right and categorize or componentize all the areas where the water is being used. And you hang some numbers on each of those. This format has been developed and structured and now being used, and it looks like the EPA will be using this and incorporating this for water loss control nationally. If you look at the software that was developed by the AWWA National Committee, we take in the audit information and put it into a spreadsheet looking at financial, operational, and water resources in your system. So John right now will go through, and it's really kind of tough to see, but we'll present this stuff, and then in the report you'll see it a little bit better, the auditing software.
This is a representation of the page that you have in your report. And this is kind of a finer detail. What I need to do is minimize this. This particular screen is the actual spreadsheet, and it is live. And what this does is allows us to look at the various aspects of the water loss. The first step here is water supplied into your system, minus your wholesale client, which is Delmar Woods at the bottom, to get the total water input into your system. And we drop down to authorized consumption, where it's broken down to billed metered water. That's the water that you're making money on. And you have billed unmetered, which you don't have any, because everything is supposed to be metered. And everybody in town that I spoke to here said, to the best of their knowledge, you have no accounts that are unmetered. Unbilled metered is water that the city uses. They meter it, but they don't bill for it. That figure is 28 million gallons per year, but I've been recently told that that figure is actually 8.1 million, because your golf courses and so forth actually do pay a bill. Doesn't matter, because it doesn't change the bottom line figure when we get down to the bottom. The unbilled, unmetered is an estimate based on flushing from hydrants and so forth over an annual basis. That was taken from your Lake Michigan, your LMO2 report, submitted to me by Bill Hensel. Your authorized consumption is totalized on the bottom. Then we do a subtractive measure to come up with your real losses and apparent losses. Your apparent losses start out here. You have 189 million per year. An authorized consumption is water supplied minus authorized consumption. You work through customer metering inaccuracies, which this is an estimate based on meter testing, the number of accounts that you have. But your apparent losses total to about 17.1 million per year. That's a combination of metering inaccuracies and potential billing errors. Then through subtractive methodology, you get to the real losses, and this is where your water main breaks and your leakage occurs here at 189 million a year. Now, your pumpage total for the year is over 1 billion. So consequently, your non-revenue water comes out to approximately 218 million gallons per year that you're not making money on. The Essentially, what we do is we take the length of the water mains in the system, 159.4 miles, do a connection density, look at the average operating pressure, because leakage is a function of pressure in the water system. We apply the total amount of dollar value that is thrown at the water system to operate it. And what we come up with is a net operation. This is what it takes to put 1 million gallons into your system. $364 per million gallons to get it pumped into the system. Financial indicators spell out where your trouble spots are. 16.7% non-revenue water as percent by volume. Seems like a lot. In realistic terms, however, the annual cost of your loss of water by revenue through apparent losses, metering inaccuracies, and billing inaccuracies is actually fairly low. $82,113 a year. Your real losses come in at $62,000 approximately. So the cost of the water that you lose in your water mains annually is running an estimated $62,000 per year. Now, how much money are you willing to spend to chase that down? Well, in typical terms, what the software does is it creates this index called an infrastructure leakage index. You come out to a 2.39. On a national scale, that's a benchmark against other utilities throughout the United States that range from 1 all the way up to a 12. Lower score is better. With you operating your system at a 2.39, you need to pat yourselves on the back because you're doing a terrific job based on the national scale.
John, can I ask you a question? On that sheet that you have there,
Yeah,
you had water losses of 189 million gallons per year, is that correct?
that's correct.
And you had apparent losses of a little over 17 out of that 189, is that correct?
We back up here.
Sorry. Oh, excuse me, you would scroll down, I apologize.
Real losses minus, your water losses minus apparent losses, yeah, okay?
Right, so you had real losses of 100, let's say 172, and
Okay.
apparent losses of 17.
Correct.
So then how come the annual cost for the apparent losses is higher than the annual cost for the real losses when by the gallons per year?
Because you're applying what you charge as an average to your residents on the apparent loss side. For example, you're billing approximately 4 point whatever per dollars per 1,000 gallons. Now, the cost to produce of your water is $380 some to push it out the front door of your pump of your treatment plant. So you're not realizing the revenue from that water, and that's why you have the difference there in the revenue.
In simplified
I
terms,
didn't follow that.
the apparent losses are your retail cost, what it costs the customer. The real losses are what is the marginal cost, what it costs to make the water. So that's a big difference. That's why those two costs are different.
But I thought you said that the $62,700 is actually the money that we're not getting,
In real losses.
the real losses.
Yeah, that's the cost that it takes for your treatment plant to push the water out the front door into the distribution system. That is not a
Chemical-
retail cost. That's a wholesale cost.
That's a delivery cost?
Correct.
Yes.
They call it marginal
It's
cost.
a delivery cost. And the parent losses is the lost revenue?
Correct.
Oh, okay. You use the word cost, and you're talking about two different costs
Yes, we
there.
are.
So it's not annual cost of apparent losses, it's lost revenues.
Yes, in direct terms, yes.
If we were metering correctly, we would sell another 17,000 or 17 million
172,
gallons
right.
of water that we would sell to our customers.
Right. Now, it's impossible to have a perfect system because we estimate that your metering accuracies may be off by as much as 1.5%. We reviewed your meter testing reports, something that our company does for business. We test meters, we repair them, so we understand metering inaccuracies inherently. The folks that you guys use to test your meters do a very good job. They're one of our competitors, and I would recommend them to pretty much anybody. And I say that tongue in cheek because they do a very good job. Nonetheless, your metering inaccuracies, because of you have such new water meters in relative terms, you guys should be able to see your revenues stay current before you start to see them decline, because your meters are young by general terms. Okay? We have several other clients whose meters average 25 years or older. Yours are about 4 to 5 years old. So your accuracies are still within AWWA accuracy limits. So you've got losses, but they're what I would term very, very acceptable. Again, you look at the ILI that you have, the infrastructure leakage index, a 2.39, different cities that we've done audits with, they would kill to have those numbers. They would die to have them. Baltimore estimated at a 12. City of Philadelphia currently is running about a 9. City of Chicago, we don't know. Okay?
John, maybe those numbers you see in the box next to there are kind of confidence levels, because a lot of these numbers can be estimated or are estimated.
These numbers right here.
And the higher that confidence level, number 9, the more we have confidence in that's the number that is closer to what reality is. So all your numbers, because of the data review and discussions with your staff, are pretty high up there. You can see 10s and 9s.
Your confidence level in your data is about an 86 out of 100. That's very, very good. It's something worth bragging about. With this spreadsheet, there comes a list of recommendations that AWWA has put together. We printed those off for you to view. I'm not going to bore everybody with the details. But essentially, the bottom line is keep doing what you're doing. Keep an active leak detection program running. Do it annually. Do large meter testing and some sample meter testing on the small meters annually. That way, you can recover your costs of your meter testing and your preventive leak detection efforts. Okay? Those are our recommendations.
So other than, making sure that the meters are operating properly, the only other solutions to reduce our dollar losses is something that's going to require some digging underground for pipes and so on?
Well, that would be the case, however, you get to a point of the law of diminishing
I
returns,
understand.
okay? And that's why an annual leak survey is worthy of doing. The cost might be estimated anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 annually, but if you can recover that $20,000 to $30,000 out of potential lawsuits and water loss and the cost to do repairs, it does pay for itself usually within that year. Okay? Yes,
Just
sir.
out of curiosity, I'm trying to think of how to approach the question. As you said on your data, you're not going to have a perfect system because there's going to be some water mains that are going to break at some point.
That is correct.
There's going to be some loss. In a system like ours, if it was running at its peak of efficiency but factoring in predictable losses, what would be the percentage of maybe predictable loss for water main breaks? Just
That would
events.
require probably some engineering modeling, and there is predictive software out there which you can be employed by engineering firms that can come in and predict the types of breaks that you might encounter based on the age of your system. They would have to rate the water main based on the criticality of that main, the age of the main, the propensity that it might break, and so forth and so on.
what I was getting to is if, say we have an 8% loss and there's an unavoidable 5% loss, really we're chasing a 3% margin.
Yeah, that would be right.
And the other curiosity, and this is just statistical, I noticed our greatest loss months were on the charts January, by coincidence. And I'm wondering if there was any type of maintenance of facilities that we might be doing that might heighten the loss. Weather, obviously, as you pointed out, could be, but I was curious that the highest percentage was January in both years on the chart that you provided.
Well, you're going back to using percentages of losses again, okay? And we caution you on that because that's not a true indicator of what's going on. We know based on what we've seen in the system that your operators do a great job. You guys have pressure monitors in your system. If a main break occurs and they start to see pressure drops, they know right away. And they know approximately what area of the town it's in.
Yeah.
Most other utilities don't do that. You guys are way ahead of the curve on that. And in terms of what's acceptable is dictated to a certain extent by the state of Illinois. They use a different format of auditing, which is the Elmo 2 report, okay? And they give you a lot of fudge factors that are not built into this system. What this does is help you target planning for the future. We'd recommend that you use this format once a year, and we're giving you this stuff. It's free software. It's out there for everybody to use, and that you guys employ this once a year based on your budget year, so you can go back and track it. With an ILI of 2.39% or 2.39, you have to remember that's a unitless number, dimensionless number. It is used as a benchmarking tool to compare your system against other systems nationwide.
And to Ken's point, the highest water loss in gallons, not percentage, were January and January.
Well, not always. If
Well,
you,
on-
if
on
you,
this they were.
okay, if you look, you do have some areas there that in August, you had some losses as well. Okay, so it didn't always happen in January.
The highest,
Yeah.
by coincidence.
But that's very typical because of the extreme temperatures with your infrastructure age and the depth of bury. You get cold weather, you just seem to have more breaks.
Yeah.
And you're really not gonna avoid that unless you start replacing a lot of that infrastructure. But that's key to manage that replacement. If you have a lot of main breaks, track that history, then replace that length of pipe where you have a number of leaks over the years. And then you'll avoid more leaks, because once you start getting those leaks, you're gonna capture more leaks every year in that same spot. But it's, I mean, we have some more information if you have time, but we wanted to present this. It's kind of like a fire drill here a little bit, trying to get you through this, but hopefully you understand it, and now's the time for any questions.
We appreciate it. Any questions on this? Thank you very much for coming.
We
in.
appreciate
Thank
you all, and look forward to helping you all in the future.
Great.
We'll leave the presentation also for you, if you need to go through it anymore, because it has some more graphical interpretations.
Okay, great.
Have you provided any necessary training for somebody at the city to use the software?
It's pretty self-explanatory,
Okay.
but anybody who has any questions, we've got, they can call me anytime, anywhere,
Great.
and either myself or Tom.
Yeah, we give workshops at the national, at the Chicago conference we had back in June. I think we got another workshop coming up potentially next year, but we made it easy to understand. That's why we developed it, kind of hands-on and user-friendly. But you can get into a lot more detail than that, so at least it's a top-down approach.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Deer Path Golf Course. Mary Van Arsdale from the Director of Parks and Rec will present.
Good evening. I'm going to share with you tonight some information on the Deer Path Golf Course financials. I just want to back up a little bit and just mention that it's been, Kathy Reinerson has been working with me a little bit because I started to notice with the staff, some challenges with changes in our number of rounds that we've had, our financials the last couple of years, and so we started to put everything into a chart similar to what you've seen before with a forecasting chart. And along with that, we also felt it was important to begin to share with our golfers what is a changing, field of golf and how does that impact Deer Path Golf Course. And from using those two approaches, we decided to hold a public meeting with our golfers back on October 5th to kind of share with them what was happening in the industry, what we saw on the horizon as some more bigger challenges for our golf course, and then really what is happening financially. And that's what I'm going to walk through with you tonight. We were really excited about the meeting on the 5th because we were fortunate to have Pellucid Golf there. They are a consultant that does national work for a variety of golf industry purposes, and they were there that night, presented some information, and we also talked a little bit about Fort Sheridan's project. I'm going to walk you through very quickly. Hang on, go back. We're at the back of the presentation. Start at the beginning. Just a couple things to share with you very quickly is that this first chart was one that was shown by Pellucid Golf at the meeting. And basically what this was showing is what's happening more in the Chicagoland area. And in some ways we've been fortunate that we have not had the impact of oversupply challenges that some of the courses in the southern part of the country did, where there was just so much new supply being added that it also contributed to some of the loss of the rounds and challenges that golf courses were facing. And that's where you also see a lot of the courses being closed, significantly being closed in those parts of the country. So Chicago was somewhat insulated from that because of the age of our properties up here in the area and how built out it was. But we still saw that there was a lot of courses, offered in the Chicagoland area, and there has been some impact. So they were showing that supply growth here has not been quite as significant, but rounds losses been greater than the national average, around 1.3% greater in the Chicagoland area. And that's, they think, contributed to a couple factors. One has been, the economics and what has hit in this area, as well as demographic changes with some age groups that are particularly playing for the junior level. And then, of course, some of the weather issues that we've had for the last few years as well. So overall, what Pellucid was sharing with us that night is, the loss of rounds continues to tumble. We're not different than what many other courses are feeling. Now, that is going to be the upcoming challenge here, is how do we manage that aspect and, understand where we're headed. So moving to the next one, this was a chart that I provided at the meeting, and the Lake County Forest Preserve districts collected all this information as part of the Fort Sheridan Preserve project. And I thought it was a great snapshot of the Forest Preserve golf course performances, as well as the surrounding Park District courses and municipal courses that border Lake Forest. And Deer Path's information is down here on the bottom corner for you on your chart. And I think overall it'll show to you that we actually have a very strong performance compared to many of the other courses in the area. A couple items that are a little bit different for each of the courses to point out is that the Forest Preserve courses, which was the Braylock and Countryside and Thunderhawk, when they listed their number of full-time employees, they listed as full-time equivalent employees. And all the Park District courses actually listed the number of full-time employees. So those numbers are a little bit different in there. Even having said that, however, Deer Path Golf Course continues and does have the smallest size staff of all of the courses in the area that are full-time or full-time equivalent. If we added our full-time equivalent in there, our number goes up to about 9.2. So you can still see, compared to the Forest Preserve courses, we're significantly lower in staffing levels at our course. And then the other thing just to kind of highlight on there was the rounds. We were really closer to 38, almost 39,000 rounds at Deer Path in 2006, and have slowly been losing and dropping in rounds to 35,000 approximately, which was shown in 2009. And this year's golf season, we're estimating, will probably be closer to 33,000 rounds. So we have seen a decrease in our rounds at the golf course. And And then also capital is a little bit different too, depending on if we've had some significant projects or not. But if you look at the capital from a lot of the other courses around us, the capital is really kind of all over the map, really depending on how dire of a situation their golf course really is in right now.
Mary, when I look
Yeah.
at Lake Bluff and Sunset, how are they surviving if they're losing $300,000-$400,000 a year?
They're subsidizing it by their park district revenues. From their main fund. And that is one of the changes, and I have it on the sheet as far as something for you to talk about in November, is we're currently an enterprise fund. It used to be very typical of what you saw, especially municipal golf courses, and money that was created by the golf course stayed in a separate specialized fund for golf course purposes only. And as courses started to struggle, they moved them into just a regular recreation fund and use any revenues throughout their entire system to help support their golf course. Lake Bluff has that structure, as well as Sunset Valley Golf Course now. So that could be an option that we could look at as well.
I have a question
Yeah.
too. In your rounds of golf and seeing the drop, I don't know if at some point we could get a chart showing where the rounds have fallen off,
Sure.
because I think the weekends you're still full on your, the day, the certain day, the times,
Sure.
and just see maybe, some of that can be helped with the efficient marketing in those particular times, or why aren't people playing then? I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah. We have definitely seen, it's, continues to be a challenge to bring in the non-resident rounds, and, it's also been a challenge during our non-peak hours.
Yeah.
So-
But it's it's a couple of thousand rounds suddenly,
Right.
like, it's like falling over the hills, so.
It's definitely decreasing. We saw it even in our membership sales. We lost a significant number of members in the junior level. As an example, we lost a lot of our youth. They are choosing to pay daily if they come out, or choosing other, options with their time right now. And we talked with a lot of parents. The parents were continuing maybe with the golf, but they weren't doing the kids, or vice versa. We also saw a lot of drop off in our couple memberships. So one would buy, but the other one would just pay it daily when they did play. So we also saw it on the membership side. So, okay. So just moving on, I wanted to share with you that there has been numerous studies over since 2005. The city conducted 2 with Pellucid. That was part of our consortium studying, trying to understand what would be the impacts if something did get developed at the town of Fort Sheridan Preserve. So we had 2 done in 2005 and 2008 by the city. The Lake County Forest Preserve District has done 3 significant market studies. And Deer Path, we did the cost of services study back in 2009 to better understand where we were. So there's a lot of data that we have been tracking all the way back since 2005 about what's kind of happening with golf in this area. So, there was a question is, well, can we do a study? And there has been a lot of studies already completed. This is a summary snapshot, really, of what is kind of the picture. We've got some declining revenue and rounds, as we just touched on. We do have modest operational expenses, for the course, chemicals and fertilization or tree trimming and those kinds of things. We do have debt on the course for the improvements that were made back in 2005, which was the irrigation, the sand trap improvements, and the water quality. So that was back from 2005, and that will be on the books till 2023. And then we have some necessary capital expenses. We've been tackling a few each year, but nothing too significant. And you'll see on the next chart I'm going to show you, we have some equipment that is as old as going to be 20 plus some years old. And we do need to be on top of that because we've been keeping it together by, twine and tape. And we're reaching the limit to probably some of that equipment now. So beginning in fiscal year 12, which is this next year, is one of that jumped out as a challenge from the perspective that when the debt was issued, we did have a bond conveyance that said that we would keep a ratio of 125% revenue to expense, and we will be dropping below that based on the projections that we had put together for this next fiscal year. And then in fiscal year 14, we're going to have problems even covering the debt and the capital needs based on operational flow that we see. So let me walk you through that a little quickly. But first, this was that list I put together for capital. As you know, we put together a 5-year list. Doesn't mean that we are going to absolutely do all of these, but we put a list together. We commit to 1 year, the next funding year that we have. But these are the items that we identified were probably, critical or should be considered. Some of them are revenue streams and customer service delivery items, and other parts of it are just aged, equipment that needs to be replaced. This next picture is a picture of the Concept 2B, which the Lake County Forest Preserve is considering for one of their options that the ad hoc advisory group has been working on. This is, I think, the most preferred hybrid option that was under consideration. They have not presented anything that was along the line if this was just to be developed as a forest preserve property without a golf course. But I know you've been familiar with the work that's been going on for the past year on this. But I wanted to share this with you because this is the golf, the concept that has a golf element in it. This is based on a 9-hole course with possibly 4 holes having 2 tee boxes to give it a 13-hole play option. It would have 2 holes that actually be near the water, and then interspersed throughout the plan with those dotted lines is various hiking and open trail type option. But there is no question, we've had studies done, like I said, from the city for 2 of them independently. The Forest Reserve has done studies that we know that if this course does move forward, it will have a significant financial impact on Deer Path Golf Course. So having said that, what would that mean? The county expert, as well as our expert that we've been working with through our consortium, says we can expect a decline in our revenues from 10 to 15% for surrounding courses. And that, for us, equates to either $135,000 loss in revenue to as much as $202,000 per year in impact to Deer Path Golf Course. We don't know exactly what year yet. That all is going to depend on when they would, if they were going to move forward, what they'll move forward with. They would go to bid, build it, grow it in. So, it's just an estimate right now. But this dollar amount is significant and important to understand, because when you talk to golfers, and I know some of you up there do love to play golf, it's so exciting, the idea of having a new course that's near Lake Michigan, and, what could be the harm in that? And I think we have to understand the implications that it has to the courses in the area, and what is the city of Lake Forest's perspective on this particular new recreational amenity that will be adjacent to our property. So this is the 5-year projection. This particular screen that I'm showing you was assuming that nothing's changing really on the horizon at the town of Fort Sheridan, and this is just as is today, projected out for the next 5 years. And as I mentioned, in yellow here at the bottom, make sure I have, this was the debt ratio, where you can see next year we're going to drop down to 98% instead of our 125% ratio. And that's about a $33,000 gap where we need to be revenue-wise to make sure that we don't fall below that particular level. And then going on into years 12 on out, as you can see, we begin to be challenged with the decline in revenue, but increase in expenses. And we start to potentially operate in the red on this particular scenario here. So about, if you look across this 5-year projection, it's really saying that in the next 5 years, we have the potential to be needing in the range of around $80,000 a year to make sure that the course can maintain its debt ratio and support all of its capital and or debt costs. Yes?
I don't have a balance sheet here, I don't think unless it's coming up, but what's the debt service survey? What's the debt for the course?
The debt was taken out in order to do the improvements back in 2005. They put in a double row irrigation system. They added the ponds on the course, and it also added, did some sand trap work.
Sorry, I did see that.
Yeah, so. And there was a question at the golf forum, and I can answer for you, and Kathy too, is that there was a question as whether we could, refinance those bonds right now. They're not able to be recalled for 2 years, and so we would take, they would not be profitable to do that right now. They range anywhere from around 3% up to a little over 4% at the time we retired the debt. So that's kind of where the debt resides right now. This next scenario was just giving you a scenario assuming that maybe the Fort Sheridan course would open and we would take those financial hits to the revenue side of our operation. And as you can see, we go significantly into a subsidy concern for the golf course, and we go from around $380,000 to over $800,000 worth of, potential source impact by having the course built. The other thing on both charts I should mention is not reflected here on the expense side is what would be the implications financially for us in fiscal year 14, which is when we anticipate the city may need to pay for a benefit package for part-time employees as part of the new healthcare reform program. So we don't know what that dollar amount necessarily will be, but obviously we have personnel at this particular facility as well. So we have to take that into consideration. So having said that, we currently are doing a membership satisfaction survey and getting some feedback from all of our members. We've had a great response rate on that. Over 150 surveys, it might even be higher by now. We'll be collecting those through the end of the month. And we're beginning to do our fee increase studies right now with finding out what our neighboring communities are thinking about for this next year. Everybody likes to kind of see what everybody else is doing, so it's a little hard to nail that down right now, but it's, again, very conservative everywhere. That's what everybody's looking at, because we don't want to price ourselves too high in the market. But we also, everybody wants to be able to cover their expenses to the fullest extent that they can. We did hear at the Golf Forum meeting that there were those who said, I'll pay a little more if that means, helping keep this course here. I love it. I've been playing here for 30 years or 20 years or 10 years. So we did hear a lot of positive support for that, and I do think whatever we come up with will probably be a combination solution, to solving some of our financial. And I think that may be a reality that we do have to maybe, continue to increase our fees for memberships and or the dailies, and see where that takes us. But we can't be so aggressive that we don't have any non-resident use, interest in coming here, or, we can't continue to attract enough to maintain some rounds out there. Because as the Pellucid professional told us, you have to think of this as a factory. You got to have the same greens out there, whether 10 play on it or 50 play on it. The cost investment into it on a daily basis is the same. It doesn't fluctuate that much. What you have to spend money on, you've got to mow all the 18 fairways, and whether or not, again, they've got giant rounds of people playing or not. Possibly the small areas to catch up as the impact for repairs and maintenance, would be lessened if you had a few less people. So we're currently working on that. We did talk about the idea of looking at privatization, because that is something we've never actually completed a study here. It was talked about, I think, a year or two before I arrived, but there was never actually a study completed at that time. And so we've never actually done that and compared what would be, the structure or the impacts, what would be the apple-to-apple comparison of what would look different at the course if we were to do something like that. Would validate whether we're managing it in the best format possible, or whether or not we should be looking at all options. So that was one that came out of the ad hoc finance committee's information, and then when I presented the cost of services study, that was also something that was suggested as something to be looked at. So we felt that we should mention that as a potential investigation item this year to look at. We had a resident who shared with us a new management structure that the city of Baltimore is looking at. It's a 501c3 operation, and she gave us quite a bit of information. I have made a call out there, but not connected with the proper individual. It's very unique. They were unionized as a large city. They had contract high prevailing rates for employees. A lot of locked-in contracts, which really kept their expense side extremely high and gave them little maneuverability to address their bottom line. We're not quite in that same situation, but I think there's aspects to that structure that we may want to take a look at. So we thought we would potentially look at that. We've been asked about refinancing the debt. Of course, that is, an option in the future. Should council be interested in that? And also whether or not we should look at whether or not some of these pieces to be replaced could be leased or what have you. So we have a little bit of homework still to be done, for this fixture going forward, and we wanted to, share that with you. November, as you know, is the key timing for a lot of this stuff. We'd like to confirm that the council is interested in us moving forward with putting together the RFP to do a privatization study. Or if you have any objections to looking at any of that one or the 501c3, we'd like to know that. There's a possibility for you to entertain the idea of changing it from an enterprise fund to a fund within the recreation department. Then all of it would operate underneath the recreation and would have the ability to be subsidized potentially from operations side from the rec department. As you know, I have no money for capital in the rec side of it, so it would have to fold into that. We'd have to somehow address that additional amount under that operation as well. And then we have water expense is one that has come up a number of times over the years. The Deer Path Golf Course is the only city facility that actually pays for its water services out of, a separate fund. It's around $72,000 annually. We have meters on the course for irrigation purposes, and then we have also meters, different size meters that are at the clubhouse, because it also has a sewage component with it too, and then at the maintenance building as well. But it's a large cost for us within the department, and because it's also been considered over the years to do a deep well, and for the irrigation side of it, obviously you still have to be on the septic side, but to be on the irrigation side of it. So those are a couple items that we could potentially discuss if that was a way to, structure it or pay for that cost in a different fashion. We wanted to, Kathy asked and said we should make sure that you are still wanting to make sure that we are going to maintain that debt covenant ratio. Do you want to do something different than what you've, done in other areas, or do you want to keep that requirement intact, and what would that mean then? And, is there any other options for funding capital that we haven't necessarily thought of yet? We're asking and looking for your suggestion and feedback on that. So I guess there's the good news. The bad news is we have a beloved course. It's well played by our residents. It's, I think, being frugally managed right now. We've been maintaining our capital quite nicely. We do have a few items each year that's coming up on the docket. We have the opportunity to do some fee growth, I think, at the course, but not enough to cover all of this. And we just need to be thinking about that now, so when we get into the November financials, you have some thoughts on that, and you can give some direction to staff on anything you'd like us to pursue.
Any
Other questions on that?
Mary, is the course open 7 days a week?
Yes.
Is there an analysis yet? Do we know which of those 7 days, if any, have lower participation rates?
We do have those. It's pretty close.
Monday's the slowest day.
Yeah, Monday's our slowest day. We try to encourage outings on that day, but they typically don't like that day as well, but.
Would there be any value to closing it one day and hoping that those players shift to another day and maybe save some operational expenses? Obviously, you're gonna have to cut the grass for Tuesday's rounds. I mean, maybe you could even think about shortening the days or something. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to figure out some other
Right.
Ways to approach this problem.
We can certainly look at those options. We've had some great, the residents and golfers that were at the meeting, some of them have suggested, brainstorming with us. We're getting some great feedback through the membership feedback survey as well. It's interesting, some say we'll do a few more outings, and others say, oh, don't do the outings because it's, possibly on a day I like to play, but we do try to, balance that in the right fashion out there. And I think Chris and the staff do a great job with, if somebody wants to walk up, trying to get them in and make sure that, we keep the course, the play pace proper, but, we'd love to do more things with family-based golf during our lower hours, as an example. Or kids play for free, mom and dad come out and play 4 holes of golf in our non-peak time, and come to the clubhouse afterwards for a hot dog kind of thing, and start, seeing more of the family time come out. Because that's one of the things you read in the industry, that you're seeing fewer golfers because the challenge times families have to commit to what it would take to play 18 holes of golf and their other family commitments. So those are the kinds of things I think we can start to do a little bit more of in the next year.
The 501c3, would the city give up control if it went that way?
Well, it looked like in the information I was reading, is basically they leased, and, you know, in essence, the course to this 501c3 for $1 a year. They opened a line of credit and they gave them a startup fund to kind of begin to get the business rolling, and then they were actually ran independently. Anything profit and loss was really, seemed to be on the 501c3's responsibility. I haven't, like I said, unfortunately, I've not been able to connect with the right person out there to track that down, but we're gonna try to look into that a little bit more.
Any other questions?
I have one more question, Dave. Mary, on the issue of the debt covenant ratio, you say agreement to maintain the debt covenant ratio is required. Is that a requirement as part of the borrowing, and would you be in default of the borrowing if you did violate your covenants?
Kathy, you wanna answer that?
Yes, currently, the city council passed an ordinance when we issued the bonds saying that we would maintain that ratio. So we'd be in violation of our own ordinance, and Moody's, if they're reviewing our financial statements, could take that as a negative implication for our rating.
For our overall city rating or for the bond rating? Are they one of
Overall,
Is this issue a standalone issue?
this
that has
issue
that?
is backed by the revenues of the golf course, and they would not issue the bonds without a secondary backup, and we pledged our sales
So
tax
it's a
against
GO.
it. Yeah.
And so, we're covered on our debt service.
Just a quick question.
Yeah, we do.
It's a general question. For Fort Sheridan, is there any timetable as far as decisions, or is it just gonna be kind of looming on the horizon that this could happen?
Well, I think that they are going to be seeking this ad hoc advisory group to make a recommendation, probably towards the end of this year. Jim, I don't know if you could correct me if I'm not on track with that, but my understanding is that's going to be towards the end of this December. There's a meeting in November 17th at Gorton to talk about the topic. It's open to the public. Again, I think that, you know, we came to the table and participated because we needed to know what was the possibility at the course and put numbers to it to actually know what the implications could be. Now that we've seen that, it's just not a great scenario for most of the courses, and we're just adding inventory in an area that, you know, doesn't need more inventory. And that's part of the concern. I mean, the Forest Preserve is gonna wrestle with this topic. You know, if the recommendation is to go with this, you know, 2B option, Forest Preserve's still gonna wrestle with it, because this will also impact their own courses and potentially close some of their own courses. So that's a big challenge. Obviously, the deed restriction and trying to find a middle ground to, you know, meet the needs of the people who bought their homes in the town of Fort Sheridan is another key element to the side of the coin that, you know, it's not our issue per se, but that's what the Forest Preserve is wrestling with it. So our thought is that they're going to try to bring something for a decision to Lake County Board after the first of the year.
Okay, so we're coming up to a fork where it's gonna be impacting our budget dramatically, so.
Correct. And we did encourage and did tell our members to go on to the Forest Preserve's website and look at the information. It's very detailed there. There's opportunities for any resident to fill out a comment card on their thoughts on this course and where they're headed, and so that option is out there, and they're continuing to collect input from the community on this topic as well.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Opportunity for the public to address the Finance Committee on Finance Committee items. Hearing none. Other business, just quickly, the flash report was in there. We had a nice September. Everything pretty much is above budget for the year, so that's good. Let's hope it continues. Any questions on that or any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? We're adjourned. Council meeting in 5 minutes.